Chapter 2. Raid on the High Slope. The supper bell had not finished ringing when the first roof caught fire. For one stupid heartbeat, Bram thought someone had dropped a lantern. The flame bloomed too high. Too sudden, orange teeth biting into the old vatch above the cooper's shed. Then, a second streak crossed the dark and struck the dirt beside the storehouse doors, throwing sparks where there was nothing worth burning. Not a mistake. Inside. The word cracked harder than the bell. Wren never shouted unless a tree had shifted or a fool had put his foot where the tree wanted to fall. Bram heard that tone and forgot the bread in his hand. Forgot the joke Tobin had been making with both cheeks full. Forgot the warm press of bodies around the supper benches. People moved. Not enough of them. Not fast enough. The village had practiced floods, winter sickness, rock slides, lost children, bears in the lower pens. It had not practiced arrows that chose where to land. The wrongness of it slowed everyone by a heartbeat. Old Gerd ran toward the cooper's shed with a bucket, all instinct and no plan. Sella screamed for someone to fetch her ledger. Voice cracked with the panic of a woman who knew exactly what a winter could take. A little girl Bram knew only as Lisa's cousin stood in the lane with both hands over her ears while sparks fell around her like fireflies. Ordinary danger had a shape. You could shout the shape and people understood how to move. Bear. Flood. Tree down. Raid had no village muscle yet. It had only stories. And stories were useless things when men came out of the dark without banners. Bram grabbed Tobin by the back of his coat and shoved him toward Mira.
Get to the cellar.
Where's Mom?
Get to the cellar.
Bram shouted, hard enough to make Tobin flinch. If he let anything softer into his voice, it would break. Tobin twisted in his grip, all elbows and outrage.
Bram, let go.
No.
You're hurting me.
Good, Bram thought, and hated himself for it. Hurt meant Tobin was still close enough to be held. Mira caught the boy. Her eyes went past Bram, to the storehouse, to the tree line, to the gap where the road bent between two marked pines. She understood at the same moment he did. The raiders were not driving straight for the homes. Two of them had broken from the trees and were moving low along the fence line, toward the cedar rails where the wandwood billets were stacked. A third carried something flat against his chest. A board? No. A map case, maybe, or a tally board. He stopped long enough to look at the storehouse wall, not the people running past it. That was worse than a torch. It meant thought. It meant someone had stood somewhere dry and decided Alderfall was a problem with parts. Smoke here. Fear there. Wood there. People moved aside like brush. Before a cut. Bram wanted it to be senseless. A senseless thing could be hated cleanly. A senseless thing did not look at a storehouse door, ignore a crying child, and reach for the timber first.
They want the wood.
Wren's hand closed on his sleeve. You don't know that? The third raider pointed toward the storehouse. Wren let go. The world became pieces Bram could use or fail to use. The goat fence angled wrong for a charge but right for cover. The rain barrel by the wash shed had a loose hoop. The old skid road ran. Behind the storehouse, soft with last week's mud. Smoke from the cooper's roof blew down slope. Toward the upper road, another arrow hit a roof. Too far from the storehouse, too high to catch fast. Driving people away, Bram thought. Like flushing grouse.
Mira, get everyone below the smoke.
Bram, wait.
Below the smoke.
Her mouth tightened. She wanted to argue. Instead, she dragged Tobin with her and started shouting names. Not orders. Names worked better. People turned when they heard themselves called. Tobin fought her for 3 steps, then saw Bram's face and stopped fighting. That was almost worse. Bram ran for the rain barrel. The first raider reached the storehouse door and put a blade through the latch cord. He wore no bright colors, no banner, nothing from the stories that made enemies kind enough to announce themselves. His face was pale under a dark hood. His boots had a hooked mark in the heel. The same print. Bram swung the axe into the rain barrel hoop. The wood burst. Water slammed across the yard in a black sheet, mud rising under it. The raider looked up. Bram threw the axe. It spun badly. He had never liked throwing it. An axe belonged in the hand. But the flat of the head clipped the raider's wrist, and the blade meant for the latch went skittering under the storehouse steps. The man cursed in a language Bram did not know. Bram did not wait to learn it. He hit him shoulder first, and they both went down in the mud. The raider was stronger than he looked. Trained, too. His knee came up hard into Bram's thigh. His free hand went for a knife at his belt. Bram grabbed the wrist with both hands and felt how wrong this was. Not wrestling Tobin out of a ravine. Not hauling timber. This man was trying to open him. Bram drove his forehead into the raider's cheek. Pain flashed white. The knife missed his ribs and cut his coat. Bram smelled wet wool, smoke and blood. He scrabbled for the axe haft, fingers sliding in mud. The raider made no wild sound. No villain's curse. He breathed through his teeth and adjusted, calm enough to be terrifying, bringing his knee up again while Bram was still trying to remember where the sky had gone. A shout rose from the storehouse's far side. 2 more raiders were not trying to burn it. They were marking the doors. One had a blue-stained tool in his hand. Bram's fingers closed on the axe. The fire behind him roared higher and the village screamed itself awake. Bram did not win the fight at the storehouse. He survived it badly. That mattered. Later, if anyone spoke of the road and the deadfall, as if Bram had stood in the middle of the lane with his axe raised and hero light on his shoulders, Bram would remember mud in his teeth and the raider's breath against his cheek. He would remember being too slow twice. He would remember Veer making his hands stupid before work made them useful again. The raider's elbow split his lip. Someone kicked him behind the knee. His shoulder struck the storehouse step hard enough to numb his arm. He got the axe up. Getting the axe up was the only thought still working. And the man above him flinched from the blade long enough for Ren to hit him with a mattock, not the sharp end. Ren always said sharp ends were wasted on skulls.
Move.
Bram rolled, came up coughing smoke, and saw the upper road filling with shadows. Villagers were running that way. The lower sheds were burning. The raiders wanted them there. Bram saw it in the shape of the movement. The way dark figures left openings where frightened people would choose them. Herding. Like driving goats away from a broken wall. The upper road ran under the high slope. Under the hung deadfall, Bram tasted blood and rain and understood what the raiders had not. They had marked the wood. They had counted billets. They had watched the storehouse. They had not spent 15 years being shouted at for taking the slope too fast. They did not know where the mud held water under needles. They did not know the old skid road had been cut around a buried shelf of stone. They did not know Ren had refused to let anyone touch the deadfall. Not dead enough to trust, he had said.
Ren, look.
Bram pointed with the axe.
Get them off the road.
The old man looked once.
Bram, no.
Bram was already running. The slope was a black shape above the road, pine roots gripping mud that had been wet for days. The deadfall lay where last winter's storm had left it, a tangle of trunk and branch caught against two rocks. It was too heavy to move, too dangerous to cut in daylight, Wren had said. That had been before people were underneath it. Bram climbed on all fours, axe looped tight around his wrist. Mud filled his nails. A branch tore his cheek. Below, someone shouted his name, then a different shout swallowed it. The raiders were close enough now that he could hear metal knock against leather. He reached the deadfall and put one hand against the trunk. It wanted to go. Everything in it wanted to go. Rain had softened the bank. The roots holding the lower end were peeled halfway from the slope. One wrong cut would send it too soon and crush villagers with raiders. One slow cut would do nothing. Bram set his boot where the slope held, not where it looked like it held. He swung. The first blow jarred his split lip. The second bit deeper. He stopped after the third and listened through the screams, through the fire, through his own breath. Not there. Panic said cut harder. The wood said cut smarter. He shifted 2 handspans left, to the root twisted around stone, and drove the blade in low. The root popped, wet and fibrous. The deadfall groaned. Below, Mira screamed.
Get down now.
Bram threw himself uphill. The slope opened. Deadwood, mud, and stone tore loose together. The trunk rolled once, struck the road, and burst into branches. Raiders scattered. Villagers fell flat, or were dragged down by people who loved them enough to bruise them. The upper road vanished under a wall of timber and black mud. For a moment there was no sound except rain on leaves and the huge, settling creak of wood. Then sound came back wrong, not all at once. A cough first. A sob. A mule shrieking somewhere below the smoke. Someone laughed once, their body mistaking being alive for joy, then stopped, ashamed of itself. Then a raider climbed over the branches, face streaked with mud, sword in hand. There was no graceful way left in Bram. He slid down the slope, hit the deadfall on his hip, bounced, and landed inside the broken road with both boots under him by luck or stubbornness. The raider turned. A sword was a weapon. Clean, narrow, quick. Bram's axe was a tool. He hooked the sword arm with the beard of the blade and pulled the man off balance like dragging a branch from a pile. The raider recovered fast. Too fast, but the road was no longer a road. His heels sank. Bram's did not. Bram had already felt where the mud would take weight. He struck with the flat first, shoulder, knee, then the haft across the jaw. The raider dropped. Bram stood over him, shaking so badly he nearly fell too. The deadfall had saved the road by ruining it. That was the first thing Bram understood after the blow left his arms. The second was that people had still been on it. The third was uglier. He had chosen where the mountain fell. He had chosen quickly, and he had chosen better than the raiders. But choice did not become clean simply by saving more than it broke. He stumbled over the branches, boots slipping between snapped limbs. A child cried somewhere under the tangle, high and furious, which meant alive. Bram followed the sound and found Lisa's cousin pinned by a forked branch across her skirt, not her legs. Thank the old roots for that. He chopped the smaller limb once, twice, then wedged the haft under and lifted while Mira dragged the girl free by both wrists.
Don't lift with your back.
The words were so normal Bram nearly laughed. Then he saw her sleeve.
You're cut.
Not usefully.
She pushed past him before he could look closer. Ren was on the far side of the road, kneeling beside old Gerd. The mattock lay in the mud. Gerd's bucket had spilled and rolled under the deadfall, still half full of water no one needed now. Bram started toward them, but Ren looked up and shook his head once. No. One word without sound. Bram stopped. The axe head lowered until it touched mud. He had never seen Ren ask for less help before. The blocked road held raiders back, but it held grief in too. Villagers crawled out from under smoke and branches. Someone shouted for cloth. Someone else shouted for their mother, and then kept shouting after the mother answered. Fear had not heard. A goat with one burned ear bolted through the lane and knocked Tobin flat. Tobin sat up swearing so fiercely that Bram knew he was unhurt. Bram's hands could not decide what to do. The axe hung from them. Tool. Weapon. Tool again. He wanted to split branches, carry children, dig mud from mouths, put Gerd back into the shape he had been. Before the road vanished under wood, there was too much. This was not the clean moment in stories where brave things solved the danger and everyone knew how to cheer. The deadfall had bought space. It had not bought peace. Hooves pounded beyond the lower bend. Men in Von Mark Green came through the smoke with shields up and swords drawn. Late enough to be alive, early enough to see the blocked road, the stunned villagers, the raider in the mud, and Bram with his axe hanging from one hand. One of the soldiers lowered his shield. An older man rode. Behind him, rain silvering the dark stubble on his jaw. His eyes moved from the deadfall to the storehouse to Bram.
You, name.
Bram looked back at the village. The cooper's roof was still burning. Mira had Tobin under one arm and blood on her sleeve. Ren was on his knees beside someone Bram could not see. Victory, if that was what this was, smelled like smoke and split earth.
Bram?
The officer heard him. Worse, the officer looked as if he had understood. The night after the raid did not end. It only thinned. The fires were put down before dawn, but smoke stayed in the village like an unwanted soldier. It sat in rafters. It clung to blankets. It turned every cough into a reminder. Bram carried water until someone took the bucket from his hand, then carried a child until someone took her too, then stood in the lane with no shape left to be. No one slept. People closed their eyes and opened them again. The dark behind their lids still had arrows in it. The village counted by touch. Mothers touched heads. Brothers touched shoulders. Old men touched doorposts and found them warm. Bram touched the axe haft whenever he lost track of his own hands, then hated the comfort of it. The haft felt exactly the same as it had before.
Sit down.
I'm fine.
She looked at the blood on his mouth, the mud to his thighs, the way his hands would not open all the way.
That was not a question.
He sat on the chopping block outside the long shed. Mira took his chin and turned his face toward the lantern.
Hold still.
I said I'm fine.
Then be fine quietly.
The cloth she pressed to his lip was cold and clean and smelled faintly of lye. Her fingers were steady. That was how Bram knew she was frightened. Mira's hands shook only when no one needed them. The block had a split down the middle he had meant to wedge. Before winter. The thought came in clear and useless. Wedge the block. Mend the goat fence. Restack the billets. Tell Ren the upper skid road needed gravel before the thaw. Ordinary tasks lined up in his head like villagers waiting at the well, each one with a face, each one impossible, while soldiers moved through Tyrm. Vanmark men had made a guard around the storehouse. That was the thing everyone noticed and no one liked. The dead were covered near the common hearth. The wounded filled the washhouse. Cella's roof still smoked at one corner. But the storehouse had soldiers first, shields angled outward, eyes on the tree line and on the villagers both. That was what made people quiet, not the soldiers themselves. Alderfall understood men with swords if those swords were pointed outward. It was the way the shields made a wall around the timber. Before anyone had finished saying the names under the cloths, 2 soldiers carried the best billets into the yard and laid them on canvas. Not roughly, not gently, exactly. Another man with a ledger crouched beside them and read the ends by lantern light. He did not look like a fighter. His cloak was too clean beneath the ash, his fingers stained with ink instead of oil. And when he touched the stormwood, he did it with the careful disgust of a person handling someone else's wound.
That one.
A soldier rolled a billet half over.
Again.
The billet turned, showing a thin blue line hidden under pitch near the heart grain. The ink-fingered man made a mark in his ledger. Bram watched from the chopping block with water cold in his gut. It was one thing to know the raiders had cared about the wood. It was another to see Vanmark care in almost the same posture. Bent close, counting, reading what village hands had hauled and stacked and sweated over. Sella saw it too.
That's Alderfall timber,
she said from her bucket. No one answered. Everyone knew it, and no one knew what knowing allowed them to do. One of the soldiers had the grace to look ashamed. The ledger man did not. He tapped the next billet.
Turn it.
Old Gerd cut that one.
The ledger man paused, as if she had named an accounting mark he did not recognize. Sella's voice stayed flat.
He was fussy about the grain. Said shrine carpenters were cheats if they didn't pay for waste cuts.
The man looked at the covered shape near the hearth, then at the billet, then down at his ledger. His pen moved. Bram did not know which thing he had recorded. Ren stood with both hands on the storehouse doorframe and watched each log moved. Bram knew that face. Ren wore it when a tree had fallen across the only usable road, and the first man to speak would be the one he blamed for weather. Mira came from the washhouse with a basin of red water and stopped beside Bram.
They counting what was almost stolen?
Or what wasn't?
She looked at him sharply. Bram kept his eyes on the billets. A burned roof sagged behind the ledger man. Old Gerd lay under cloth near the hearth. Tobin sat wrapped in someone else's blanket, small and furious and alive. All of that existed within 10 paces. The ledger filled faster than the graveboard.
They protect wood faster than people.
He was wrapped in a blanket that did not belong to him. His face had gone pale under the soot. Mira set a hand on the back of his head.
Inside.
I'm not little.
Inside while proving it.
Tobin went. Mira's quiet voice had teeth. The officer who had asked Bram's name stood by the marked billets, speaking with Ren. Bram could not hear the words. He did not need to. Ren's shoulders had the shape they took. Before a tree fell wrong, ready, angry, braced for damage. Pell, the soldier with the notched ear, brought Bram a cup of water. Bram looked at it.
Is this also an order?
No. Orders sound stupider.
That was almost funny. Bram drank. His throat hurt. Pell crouched beside the chopping block.
You dropped that deadfall?
Bram stared at the mud between his boots.
It was already falling.
Most things are. Takes timing to make them useful.
You always talk like that?
Only after raids. Makes me sound worth my pay.
Across the lane, 2 soldiers lifted a raider's body onto a cloak. Bram saw the hooked heel of one boot and had to grip the chopping block until the grain bit his palms. Pell followed his gaze.
First one,
Bram did not ask what he meant. Pell nodded as if he had answered.
don't let anyone tell you it should feel cleaner.
Should it feel like anything?
You'll pick something eventually.
Bram hated that answer. It sounded true. Pell looked older in the lantern than he had in the smoke. There was dried blood on his sleeve that was not his, and mud in the crease beside his mouth.
You saved people.
Bram laughed once through his nose. Pell did not smile.
I didn't say that fixed it.
Near the storehouse, Orin turned from Ren and looked at Bram again. Not with triumph. Not with gratitude. With calculation, tired and unwilling and already moving. Ren said something Bram could not hear. The officer answered. Ren's hand cut through the air, sharp and low, the same gesture he used when someone tried to cut into a loaded trunk from the wrong side. No, not there. Not unless you wanted it to split back through you. Orin looked past him. At Bram. Bram looked away first. The eastern sky had begun to pale. Behind the black trees, dawn would come. People would count what was left. Someone would remember breakfast. Someone would need the ditch cleared. Morning did not wait for funerals. Bram put the empty cup beside him and flexed his fingers. Until they hurt, they still smelled of smoke and wet axe haft.